welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is still hoping the Batman will drop by in response to his battle lantern,
Tim Longo.
Hello, sir.
All right, I admit my jack-o'-lantern was not the best Batman I could have done. But
better luck next year.
Yeah. But I still am a big Batman fan, so.
We know. Well, I know. I think people know. I think that's come up a few times, the whole Arkham thing. Yeah.
It's well beyond Arkham, but yes.
Oh, I know.
Video game-wise, yeah, that's true.
I know it is. I imagine you're all aflutter about the Justice League or whatever that's coming out next year or whatever.
It's not as much as Justice League. Like, it's really from as far as DC goes. Literally, I'm only a Batman fan. Like, the rest of DC is not really my thing.
Oh.
Well, let's see how it goes. The fact that he's obviously in it will always pull me in.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, turning to video games.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. So we've been playing Resident Evil because it's Halloween time. It's that time of year to make jack-o'-lantern jokes. Oh yeah, I figure like I should throw out a couple corrections from last time. Number one, as much as I wanted it to be, the election is still not over. I was off by a whole week. I'm like, by next week we'll be done.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
And we are not. In fact, it is up and down, up and down. But let's not talk about that. That's a totally different jack-o'-lantern joke. The other one was that Alone in the Dark was actually only 2 years before this game. Only released 2 years before this game. So it was 1994. So it was not as far back as I thought. I thought that was a very early 90s and even maybe late 80s title. But now that I think about it, that wouldn't have made a lot of sense because there was basically nothing that was 3D, flat shaded at that time.
Yeah.
The computers just couldn't quite get there. It was all sprites.
Yeah.
Or wireframe. There were occasional wireframe 3D games. And in fact, I programmed my first 3D wireframe engine in about 87 or 88. So, yep. On the Apple II, my friend.
Wow. You are old.
Yeah, I am. I am indeed old. I mean, I was 4 at the time.
No, right. Sure.
Yeah. Making my but anyway, we regret the errors. Let's turn to Resident Evil.
Yeah.
You want to jump right in with, well, basically how this thing is kicking your ass. Let's be fair on the resource management side of things.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the rest of my resources. I think I'm generally doing fine on health and ammo for the most part because I'm being pretty efficient. But specifically the save ribbons. And the irony of this is I'm playing on normal, so that's what's pissing me off even more, is that I don't feel like I'm being irresponsible with my saves. I've only saved like 11 times. I'm just leaving the mansion, the full mansion. Well, I'm about to get into the residence, so I'm behind where we're supposed to be. Right. But I've played 8 hours. And so, as I was telling Brett in pre-show, what I've discovered related to the resource management, which is such a core part of the design, is, certain mixtures of player types, which I am, being kind of the OCD, min-maxing kind of perfectionist gamer, completionist gamer, and with games with this sort of resource management. And then one of the resources being freaking save games. Like, I'm trying to be very efficient and effective with my runs, how I'm playing, and so I save when I think it's appropriate. I only have 11 saves. I think in my last save game, I have 1 ribbon left. So basically, I have the ability to do 12, or actually, it might be 11, because what I'm going to have to do now is actually play a whole section. When I got to the cabin hoping that there would be a ribbon there, and there is not. And so the typewriter's there, but I have no ribbon. So I basically had to shut the game down, and I have to play this whole last section.
That section again.
Yeah, which includes the dude in the coffin. It includes, for me, it includes the last couple masks. It's a lot. And so I basically was demoralized at that point. And what the ribbon resource management is causing me to do, which this super cynical, skeptical side of me, or really cynical side of me, says as a designer, is that some of that is to elongate playtime. Obviously, some of it is for tension and for building anticipation and fear, etc., because it is a horror game, so I understand that. But I can't help but be cynical that the way that they've balanced and tuned the ribbons on normal, let me remind everyone again,
right? Sure, yeah,
it's just unfair, and I feel it just pisses me off because I don't think I'm, like I said, I don't think I'm being irresponsible with that stuff.
Now you've been picking him up everywhere you can find him. I assume you're scrounging like crazy. You're not leaving any behind.
No. I in fact, that's another part of my OCD. Is
you're leaving the whole map green, basically.
Whatever, yeah, absolutely. Whatever I find, even if it's one green herb that I don't really need, I will maximize and make multiple runs back and forth to get that into the crate. So, because I don't want that red room. I don't want to know, because the map's not good at, obviously they haven't really gotten to the point where they're doing good markings on the maps. So if I see a red room that I've been in before, I'm not going to remember what was in there. So I want to kind of clear it out, even if it's one green herb, so I know I don't have to go back there.
That's sensible.
Yeah, I mean, it's causing me to do a lot of rerunning areas over and over again, right?
Right. So. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I was also talking on the pre-show. I've been playing on easy, and it is drastically easier. I have plenty of ammo.
The number of saves,
mostly for the handgun, and then the number of saves, I have easily 4 times as many saves for you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In fact, it's probably more than that because I pick up piles of 6 at a time.
What?
So when I pick up an ink ribbon, there are 6 ink ribbons.
Jeez, what the?
So, and I think there are in at least 4 locations in the house, in addition to the first ones you get. So you get some when you go into the dining room, something like that.
Yeah.
And I want to say I got like 9 from that.
Whoa. Yeah, see, so they're probably in the same places. It's just because I'm just getting tons. You probably got 3 and then 4 sets of 2. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think it might be 3. Might be 3 every. No, it's 2 or 3 or something like that. No, actually, one of them I found was just 1.
Oh wow!
Now
are you sure you're not playing on hard?
I'm having second thought, but maybe I don't know how to find that out. I hope that's not the case.
That's definitely. We'll ultimately roll into kind of a second topic on this, but this is those sorts of tweaks. Years ago I wrote something about difficulty, for games, and one of the things I felt was absolutely a must that every game has to support if it has difficulty settings is that you have to be able to change it. You have to be able to lower it in the middle of play.
Yeah.
And
that's more standard these days.
Yeah, that is more standard these days. It was definitely not standard. Even when I wrote that back in 2005, there were games that weren't doing that yet. And these days I feel, if you feel your game is something that has enough skill basis that you need to have difficulty levels, that is to say it's not like an adventure game, for example, that doesn't really have a straight adventure game, that doesn't have twitch skills or whatever. Or really dying, where the whole point is the puzzles. Then other than that, right? I mean, you should be able to change it at any time. A lot of games actually these days will suggest lowering the difficulty if you die a lot. So they're paying attention and they're saying, or there are even games that do things behind the scenes that make it easier, and you may not know that that's happening, and you just feel like you got better. So there's a whole variety of stuff that you can do. That was not something that happened back then. So I feel like this game kind of, it feels like, and this is a game developer thing, and actually we should roll right into it. Like difficulty management, when we're building a game, by the time we finish it and we're thinking we're the normals, we are not the normals.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
very, very, it's one of the most contentious topics. The same goes for QA, right? Because they're
Yes.
even better at the game.
Right.
So losing that perspective is really, really easy to do.
Right. I mean, I feel like this is a game that if you knew where everything was, it'd be a lot easier. As something I alluded to last episode, I said, it feels like this is a game where you want to play and then figure out the route that only takes you through each room once, or maybe twice or whatever. But, no more than a couple of times because of the sort of creeping, additional zombies coming in and things like that. So you want to kind of minimize how much you pass through a space. And that feels like a thing that developers just would naturally do, that they would just get better at doing. I actually found a weird quirk in one area where a cutscene played a second time because of something I did, which is a bug that you figure QA would catch, but they probably never thought to try what I did. We can talk about that separately, but it's not a big deal. Nothing was lost. It was just like, oh, I'm seeing this again for some reason. So yeah, I mean, I think it's likely to me that by the time they were actually to the point where they were balancing the game, they were already out of whack.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a remastered version that I think we're both playing, so there is that maybe to take into account whether they touch things again. I have a vague memory that we should look up on potentially the easy difficulty mode was actually added to the remaster. I don't know if that was in the original because of its criticism for being too hard. I'll look that up afterwards. But
okay.
But the fact that easy is so much easier is weird to me a little bit because it's the by a factor of 4, what have you. It's kind of crazy. And the silver lining for me on this, though, is, and I have to speak a little, from an uninformed place here because I think you've played the Dark Souls games more than I have, and I've only played some of Demon Souls.
I finished Demon Souls, and I've played a little Dark Souls 1.
Yeah, so I haven't finished Demon Souls, and I know that I will like it when I get back to it someday because it was definitely scratching some of the itches for me, but I just didn't have the time to commit to it. But kind of seeing some of the design at play there and how detail oriented that you can get with something like that. And this isn't on that scale, but I can appreciate trying to put myself back into the mind of someone playing this in the PS1, back when it came out, and the landscape around that we were talking about last time, and we were talking about in the pre-show as well again today. And it's taking risks with its difficulty and the way that it's dealing with the horror theme, etc., and the resource management that not a lot of things we're going to do. We talked about disempowering the player. I mean, really, this is going to be kind of an overstated point, but I'm being dramatic, but playing the game is punishing. Like to move throughout the mansion feels punishing,
right.
With the door loads and sometimes the weird flow in the level design, and it's probably all very intentional and it builds that tension up, but it's hard to put myself back into that time, but I'm sure at the time.
Well, I mean, you've got to remember, Tim. I mean, the SNES was right before this, right?
That's true. Pretty punishing stuff there.
Those games are very punishing, very punishing. Like, I mean, I played, I guess the original Metroid was NES, is that right? So I played a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. That was a very punishing game. And certainly Super Metroid is not quite that punishing, but there's stuff in there that is... I mean, there are areas that I played
the bosses are rough, yeah.
Yeah, the bosses in particular. So, but, I mean, one thing that's different there is that the controls are fluid.
Yeah,
except for a couple moves that are really are a little bit harder, and that's who knows if that's a controller thing, because we're both playing on modern controllers that are not the original SNES controllers. So
yeah.
But even then, I mean, they felt like, oh my god, how was anybody able to do this with any consistency? Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess if I was 12, I could probably do it. But yeah, I mean, there is, and we're playing the better controls, not the tank controls. It is wonky. I played this with the tank controls when it came out for the GameCube. And it was punishing. It was ridiculous. And it had, I think at some point while I was playing, I think it actually was you who told me, I heard that they put in a new control setting.
Yeah.
And you could change it over to be something a little bit more modern. And I switched at that point, but I was probably halfway through already. And it was certainly helpful. But I mean, even into the PlayStation era, and we talked a little bit about Fear Effect last time, that's another game that's in this mold, and it is just as difficult. A lot of just learning timing of I'm going to go through this area and I'm going to turn exactly here. I'm going to turn exactly there.
Well, that's that's basically what I'm doing right now because saves have become the resource for me. And because I really hope I'm not playing on hard, but it's embarrassing. I don't know that, but because when I'm doing these runs, I will occasionally die or I'll take too much damage. I'm having to basically kind of do these mini speed runs or these mini perfect runs, where I'm going from one objective or one puzzle to the other, and I have to optimize and really figure out the best way to do things because I'm doing it 4 times or something.
Right.
But I totally one of the other points. So your point about punishing games in general of that era, totally agree. I think the other way I'd put it, though, which we've talked about, I think, in other series, is that there, and we talk about, in our day-to-day development life probably all the time, is, the player needs to feel like it was something that was in their control, but they could have done better versus the game actually being unfair. And, you can't feel like it's your fault. It needs to be, or that it's the game's fault. It needs to feel like it's your fault. So if I miss a jump in Metroid, that's on me, right? I just need to get better at the game. But in this game, I feel like it often feels like it's the game's fault, that I've missed a shot, or I didn't turn around fast enough, or the game's fighting me.
Right.
And it builds the tension, as we talked about, and it's good for the genre, but to a point, and for me, because of the save situation, I've eclipsed that point.
There's a point where it becomes frustrating, and that actually works against the fear.
Yeah, right.
So,
and you start scrutinizing, for me at least, because obviously we're doing the podcast. You start scrutinizing the design, and you start asking yourself, what are the decisions? Why did they make these decisions?
Right.
And then you get more frustrated because you know that some of them were avoidable. But it's
there's a good example of a mistake that you can make as a player in this that might be fatal. It probably would have been fatal if I'd been playing on a higher level of difficulty. And that's, you can go and open the front door.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
Yeah, and a dog runs in. Mm-hmm. And you go, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do that? And that is entirely on you.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there aren't places where I feel like I made the mistake, because there definitely are. It's not like the whole game's that way. But there are enough significant ones that they made that is on them, And
the gun control in particular.
Gun control and movement as well, right? In both versions, even the alternate is not perfect, but it's Band-Aidy. The silver lining for me, and I'll close down on the resource point and we can move on, but the silver lining for me from a design perspective that I just really love being reminded of, and I think I mentioned last time being a fan of the Dead Rising games, even the first one, which the saves were all based, in the bathrooms. And so you really had to plan out your route. And there was that really tense run from one place to the save, which I really loved in Dead Rising. But you had a lot more freedom in that game too. However, the concept of something like saves as a resource being so valuable, and the power of the balancing and tuning of that variable is really interesting to me. And I always appreciated that as a bold move for the RE franchise. I just think in my particular case right now, the number that they tuned is just a little too punishing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I felt the tension a lot and it didn't bother me the first time I played it. And I did play on normal. But this time I think, just the way my life is, I don't know that I would want to be able to have to devote a long chunk of time just because I don't know how much time I'm going to have to get out of each typewriter ribbon.
Mm-hmm.
And the other point too is that even playing on easy, I'm still having all the fear responses because the lethality is still high enough. I have a lot more bullets too, but so I'm not as worried about bullets, but I kind of am because you don't want to have to reload, there's stuff like that. There are issues. But I mean, the zombies, they become those crimson ones or whatever, and they come at you really fast. All of that stuff still works, right? And none of that is precipitated on having more saves available because I'm still having all the anxiety.
Yeah.
And that comes from all sorts of different areas. Some of which we talked about last time. Also the audio, which is a whole separate topic we should probably tackle. A little bit more, maybe next time, because we didn't specifically think about it.
Yeah, it's so good. Oh, those zombie mutated zombies, though, man. There is nothing like coming into a room that you've been in before and realizing, for me at least, that I hadn't burned somebody.
Yeah,
and they hadn't, and there's been a couple cases where they haven't gotten up yet, but I can see them on the ground and notice that they've already mutated. Uh-huh. So you see the claws, and you see the color of the skin. You're like, oh no, they haven't triggered them yet. If as soon as I start moving, they're going to get up, and it's so successful.
Yeah, no, it is really good, and it feels really good if you happen to, pop the head of one.
Oh yeah,
so that you don't have to incinerate it, and that's a sort of thing that seems to happen more or less randomly. I have not found.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Keyword.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that there's a specific. It feels like just a chance thing.
I've tried to see if I can. Yeah. I mean, somebody can probably correct us, but I feel like
I gather that if you use the shotgun, it basically happens every time. So
actually, I don't know if I've aimed up with a shotgun, but I definitely had to resort to that a couple times. And one little quick mention on that, the nuance that I give them major credit for is if you have used a dagger, as a, what are they called? The
defensive
as a defensive in the head of one of those guys, and then you end up popping their head as well. The dagger will drop, and you get to pick it back up.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was something that happened to me that I was good for you. That's a player quality of life moment, I think.
Yeah, no, that's good. I actually haven't run into that, and I thought I would have. I wanted to talk a little bit about. So I was just talking about how the fear stuff was still working for me, but one way the fear stuff has not been working for me is when the sort of cutscene driven story stuff happens, and the reason. So it's specifically running into Barry. There's another character named Richard. I finally ran into Wesker again late in my play. So you run into these characters, and what it pulls me out of the experience because I stop and think, because now I'm watching a cutscene and I'm not doing a thing. I stop and think, okay, how did he get into this place? Whoever he is, how did he get here?
Yeah.
How did he get? I had to have a key that I pulled out of that block in the floor, and the armor guy was coming at me with the blades, and I had to have a special thing that I got off this dog. I'm going back through all this stuff, and meanwhile it's blah 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 on the screen, and I'm totally taken out of the moment. I don't even know what's going on between these characters, except that it doesn't seem particularly military or orchestrated in any reasonable way. It's just like this weirdness about this spatial reality that is in one way when I'm playing and in another way to tell the story. And it feels like you could have told a story that didn't involve these other characters in that way. It didn't. You could have, there's motivating things that are supposed to be happening there. Like with this guy Richard, you need to go get the serum because he's been bit by the snake, but he doesn't have a key on him, and you have to get a special key to get into the room with the snake. And so as soon as that happens, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It just takes me out. Whereas you could have had, a scientist or whatever who there. And because you're public servant. You're trying to help them, and then you're like, oh, I need this from my office. Go to my office. And, like, the story choices are really, really weird.
Yeah, it's pretty forced and kind of just ham-fistedly just stuck in there. I mean, it's bizarre. There's a macro topic here just about this franchise in general in this regard. It's sort of like you mentioned in pre-show, sort of some Kojima being a signature. Like you can see a Kojima game a mile away because it's so signature him. And I feel like whether intentional or not, RE always wanted to. Like they wanted to have a feeling of identity when it comes to their narrative and their fiction, but they never quite hit it, because it's quirky and weird, and they do have these kind of like I'm trying to think kind of throughout the franchise. There's because I'd say I'm a mild fan of the franchise overall, but there's always these events and character choices that happen that feel forced and like they're trying too hard. And to your point here, like this mixture of the story and the situation just don't match. And it just
not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you run into Barry all the time, and then the last thing he says is like, "Okay, we'd better split up." And you're like, "Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Together, we could face two different directions and move down a hallway." It just makes we'd have twice as much firepower. It makes no sense at all.
Well, and then there's the discontinuity with the player. To your point, like it pulls you out because spatial, the player would, Jill doesn't mention it at all, right? She doesn't. Right. You would expect her to say, no, wait, we should stick together at least, and then he can talk her out of it or something. But she doesn't even mention it. She's like, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we should split up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So as a player in a horror situation, it's like you're yelling at the screen like you do in a horror movie. Like, don't go down there. It's like you're saying the same thing.
But they're military people. I mean, it just like boggles my mind. It just I don't remember bumping up against that as much. I think I was so entranced by the horror that I didn't think about this stuff all that much. But it is really kind of exposing the gaminess of the level design. It makes all the locks and keys that much more apparent, right?
Yeah.
The same thing with the crate. You've got this crate where you put your stuff. I actually think it might have made more sense to lean into that a little bit more and not make it a teleporter. Like, if you had to go back to oh, man, I need a ribbon, and I left those in the crate on the other side of the mansion.
Oh,
right?
Sheesh.
I mean, that would have been...
Yeah, if they would have...
That might have been a better choice, right? I mean, you can't... Who knows, right?
How did 4... I feel like 4 did a better... Because you just had inventory on your person, I think, right? I don't remember now.
I don't either.
I think it was just...
You have inventory, I think you just had a lot more slots.
Well, then you could buy upgrades in 4 as well, like briefcases and stuff. So I think it was just on your person.
You get more space.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah.
But
I think the saves were not a resource either.
No, you're right. I think
you could just save at any save spot.
I think it was much more modern in that way.
Which I think was a good choice.
Yeah.
It was more of an action.
One thing I'm starting to regret, but I'm not going to go back and change, is, other than my difficulty level choice, but I'm going to commit, is I think maybe I should have played the original somehow and found a way to play it in its original form, because I'm wondering if the remaster, as beautiful as it is actually exacerbating some of the stuff you're talking about, where it's really shining a light on, this random weird object for this puzzle that you have to find is super well rendered and looks great, and everything's really just, but it kind of makes it much more obvious that it's a game and that it makes no sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, oh, this looks really real, but why is this thing here? This is ridiculous.
Right.
And I'm wondering if maybe playing in the old school low poly way you might have forgiven that more. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, the thing that's different, I mean, it's just the characters really that are, the rooms look pretty, I mean, they're lower res. But I mean, they wouldn't have re-rendered these spaces.
I don't. No, I think they did. I think they did a full.
You think they re-rendered all these rooms?
You mean for the remaster?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I think it looks good for its time, and that's one of the hooks that it had at the time because they were pre-rendered backgrounds. But I think they redid them all for the remaster. We should go look. Should have done a research. But
my assumption had been that they were just the highest res versions of the areas.
Shoot, you could be right. You could be right. I didn't. We'll definitely make a note of that too. Someone's yelling at their podcast device.
I'll note that now. The backgrounds get rebuilt, so we don't forget that.
Yeah, maybe not.
And I don't know. I mean, like I said, I played it on the GameCube, which is basically this version.
It's the same.
It looks the same, except that it's higher resolution because we're playing on HD TVs and things like that.
Small note with this version. Well, I'm playing on Steam. I don't know what yours is called, but did you on mine? It says Resident Evil enhanced version or whatever, HD enhanced, but then it has a slash and then it says Biohazard lowercase, and which I think is.
Biohazard is the original Japanese.
It is. However, it's interesting that they did that because this remaster just came out on Steam, because the title of 7 is actually Resident Evil 7 Biohazard.
Oh, interesting. And they maybe try to market that, tie it in.
That's what I mean. They're reintroducing Biohazard.
I think it's just called Resident Evil Remastered on PS4.
Yeah, so it's just a Steam thing. But I think it's funny that they're trying to double brand it now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Well, it's also,
which I think Biohazard's a much better name.
I also picked up Mikami's latest game, Evil Within, which was published by my old employer, and it also has another name in Japan, and I was trying to remember what it is, like Psycho something. I'm gonna look it up. It's Psycho something. I can't remember. It's a weird name.
Very different from its English.
From its English name. Yeah, for sure. Psycho Break. Excuse me.
Whoa, he is something else with his names.
Yeah, no kidding. It's funny stuff.
Even Resident Evil, I've never really gotten. You know, it's kind of like Final Fantasy.
It's evil, and it's living in the house. It's
a
Resident Evil.
Yeah, no, it's not.
No, it's not good. Actually, the translation is one of those things. You know, mostly this game is pretty well localized, but it's funny. There's a room with a tiger, little tiger head.
Yeah.
You have to put a gemstone in. And the description of it is like, you know, it has to have blue and yellow light shined on it or something like that. And you have to work out from that the gemstones. But if you actually look at the picture, on the statue it says tiger with blue and yellow eye. Like it literally said, the translation that was made into the space is actually better than the translation that was done by localization. It's a rare spot where I was like, that's weird. Anyway,
well, so
I don't want to go too much into the spatial reality stuff, but that's the game. That's the stuff where I've been feeling more game, less experience, and it pulls me out.
Oh yeah, so I wanted to tack on a subject, or a sub point to that too, though, which because in pre-show you were mentioning, from a level design perspective, the layout, I guess the structure of the house, some of the discontinuity that you're seeing there is like it feels like generally a real place, right? Like you said, there's bathrooms and there's kitchens and and the rooms make some sense, and there's a foyer and all that stuff, right? Which gives it a good sense of place. Even some of the secret doors have some thought put to them. Going outside is a cool experience, right? When you're going in the backyard and all that. But then to your point, like you have these weird events happen. There's like, well, this is just one house that's relatively real. So why are these people showing up randomly in this Deus Ex Machina kind of way? Which really that's why they're doing it, right? They just need these tools to be able to have these events happen wherever they want. But I wanted to tack on to that yes, until like I'm doing, you're running through spaces multiple times, and you're having to find the most efficient routes to do things. And if you stop to think and look at the layout of the house too much, the level design starts coming out really clearly.
Right.
Where you're like, why isn't there a door right here? This is where the door would be. This is clearly a level design choice, right? Or
Right.
or it was a block
and
out beforehand.
Perfect example is that like long hallway that has it's a big L that the dogs come into.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of like you would never have a hallway like this with no doors.
Nope.
You know, you have one door that you come in. I don't even think there's another door in that hallway except at the other end.
No.
There might be one near the
No, there isn't. There isn't. Trust me.
So it's just a big long L.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I agree. You know, and that is there entirely. So you have to go down through that long space and have the dogs.
Yeah, it's level design. It's and trust me. I mean, I'm by no means have I ever built a level or directed a level that was perfect. So it's a really difficult thing to do. But you know, having it's that age old balance of good flow and good drama and good composition from a gameplay perspective with reality. And if you go too far one way or the other, you're gonna, you know, you can break the player out of it on either side.
Exactly.
And
and you know, and you can do that to good effect. Like, I mean, so here, I'll throw out one from another horror game, and I'll throw out one from your history. No, so from another horror game, Silent Hill 2, which is a game we considered playing, and may play next year for Halloween.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
But there's a hospital sequence, and the hospital feels pretty realistic in the same sort of way as Resident Evil. Like, it's hallways with rooms on either side, and of course there's lots of decoration and bad things have happened here, but it's, you know, it's recognizably a hospital space. And there aren't lots of other characters coming in. You go instead to this house that's on a lake, and that's where the space starts to get bizarre, and you go down, like level upon level, you go down into this house to the point where you're like, this makes no sense whatsoever. Like, this is impossible. Yeah. You know, we are now like 6 stories below ground on a lakeside. You know, that's not a possible thing. You can't actually build that way. Yeah. And then you come out and you're just there on the shore, and you're like, how is that? This makes no spatial sense whatsoever. But, and the key thing with a Silent Hill game is it's probably not supposed to. It's not supposed to make sense.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is how psychological this...
It's deliberately chosen. That's the point in that game where I start going, is this even real? Like, is this meant to be a real series of events? Mm-hmm. You know, or is it meant to be something else that's going on? So, you know, I don't feel like that's the case with Resident Evil. Resident Evil feels like this is supposed to be a real place.
Yeah.
You know,
the only thing that they do that I have always liked in the playthroughs is just the kind of, I don't know if this reference will work on you, but do you know what the Winchester Mystery House is in California?
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I know
with the dead ends and all that stuff. It's like a Venturi house, but I mean, she wanted to be an architect.
Well, who? Winchester?
The woman who built it.
Well, that could be because she was the wife of, I think, or maybe the granddaughter of one of the Winchester, the empire.
She was the wife, but he died when she was still quite young. There's a whole This American Life about this.
Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe I listened to that too. But wasn't there a thing where she did? But wasn't there also a thing where she had a sort of a paranoia complex where she was trying to sort of I don't know, protect herself, or was she just tinkering and just... I
think the latest speculation is that she was just trying different architectural styles.
Okay.
Because she wanted to try them and she could just do it. She had the money to do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my point I was going to make is just that sense that this house is mysterious and that there's secret doors everywhere and you never know where one will turn up. And that one great moment that I forgot about until the replay that I always love is... There's that outdoor area in the backyard with the gate that you can't get into right away, and then you go through the room with the crows and the colored
the art gallery.
Yeah, the colored stained glass, and you get with the portrait of Lisa. Lisa, is that her name?
Yes,
and then that opens, and it's outside to that area,
yes.
And then there's a mask sitting there. So.
Right.
There's just a really great little secret door reveal of kind of unexpected. You're like, whoa, I'm outside. And no one would ever do that, but it's
exactly,
just
right. And that's another thing that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but it's just weird enough to where you're like, yeah, these people are pretty messed up. This whole thing is not good.
I got killed there because
the crows.
Yes, because I read the painting when you come in and it says something, and I interpreted it to mean turn all of them white. And then I went around and I pushed the button, and all the crows got pissed. They all came at me.
I messed up there as well, but then I ran out in time before dying. So,
not me.
Yeah, so I don't know. It does break the willing suspension of disbelief in some of those, but I also like that Winchester Mystery House feel of it too a little bit because it's just so you kind of don't know what to expect. So I know I'm kind of contradicting myself on the level design layout, but it's part of it is we're playing this. We're playing for the podcast, so I'm scrutinizing things.
It's partly a fun house too.
Yeah. I shouldn't be scrutinizing stuff. Like as a typical player, I don't think, and maybe to your point, when your first playthrough, you didn't notice some of the stuff because you're just having fun. You know what I mean? You're just we're kind of overanalyzing. I
was winding down.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and I think mostly it does work, and it really is when you stop to actually think about it that you kind of go,
Yeah. And that's the case in most level designs, if you really...
Yeah, there you go. And speaking of which, I was going to mention yours. I got distracted.
Oh, shoot.
So the other one I was thinking of was the Aetherium.
Oh, geez. Are you serious?
So the Aetherium, for those who don't know, and this is a deep cut.
Nobody played that level.
This is the game I played this level.
You're the one person.
This was Indiana Jones...
The Infernal Machine.
And the Infernal Machine, thank you. It was Tim's game he made before we worked together on Starfighter. He was a level designer, and he made the final level. And what I loved about the level was that there's like this box that you can enter, and like it has an extra dimensional space along each axis. Mm-hmm. And it's at the time that must have been hell. I mean, it was maybe a portal-based renderer, so maybe it was just because you could do that.
So yeah, I can tell the story if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, but what I loved about that was it was deliberately a non-real space. Mm-hmm. Was what I was trying to get at. It was deliberately meant to be
didn't make sense. Yeah,
a thing that didn't make sense in our reality, but that tied into the story in kind of a better way.
Yeah.
So go.
Yeah, no, that was the intention. I mean, because Hal Barwood was a project leader, and you basically, spoiler, you go to another dimension, and I was like, what? So, yeah, we could do some fun texture stuff with it, but how, and this is pretty low poly at the time, right? And N64 era stuff. And so we're like, well, I was like, yeah, we can do some wacky textures and some interesting effects and stuff, but what can I do from a level design perspective to make it super weird and ethereal? And Reed, you name dropped Reed Knight recently on the Kama Sutra thing.
Yeah, I'm going to mention that in the post the second half.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, because Reed was always a great cerebral, as you mentioned, level designer, and he told me some of the weird things the engine could do from a portaling perspective, like you said, and it was a negative space-based editor, so you could do a lot of weird things that the programmers would tell you not to do. They're like, no, don't do that. You don't want that to go into there. And so I just basically exploited the engine and put spaces inside other spaces because the engine could do it, even though it would make no sense. And it would cause scripting problems and would cause a bunch of weird things to happen, but I debugged it enough to where it just was, brittle enough to stay together, but easy to break. And it's only because that engine was able to actually do weird stuff like that. Most engines can't do that anymore, but.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's a weird thing that happens in Bethesda games, I guess too. In Skyrim, there's like these books that you can go into, and they do all kinds of weird things.
Oh.
But this was in one of the DLC, and I don't recall which, so sue me. There are these books that you go into, and then the worlds have all these kind of weird differences from our world. It's the same sort of thing. You're going into a Daedric realm or whatever, a demonic realm that's where the rules are not the same. But all that stuff had to actually work in some way, as smoke and mirrors to make it look so strange. What I love about, these are kind of just like, the ways that it works against works with or against the story you're trying to tell. So it's an interesting topic for all that stuff.
Well, anyway. It's such a cool, unique thing that video games can do. Because especially in 3D, it's not just 3D, but mainly in 3D, there's so many spatial tricks. And I mean, many years ago, I did a GDC talk about level design, and the analogy that I used a lot was basically, magicians. And how I tried to use a lot of the techniques in the talk to talk about, how magicians, reveal their and don't reveal their tricks, and how they sleight of hand and all that stuff. And that's really, especially for level design, that's really a lot of what we do, right? It's all sleight of hand and trickery.
Right.
When this game, I think bringing it back to RE, I think is a really good example of that, where there's just a lot of both literal tricks and also just perceived tricks, which I think it's a cool thing. It's a cool reminder. As frustrated as I am right now with just my run, I think it's mainly difficulty based. I still have those little moments of aha moments that I still really enjoy. So as a really quick minor thing, that another topic that I wanted to mention, piggybacking off of your fiction thing, and the Winchester Mystery House feel, I did also make a note that I am appreciating all over again the little breadcrumbs of mystery about what's going on in the house that they put in there. The little journals. Yep. Now, the thing is where I'm at in the game, because I was forgetting characters like Lisa and stuff. I still forget. You mentioned Lisa being a big deal, and I'm still not remembering who the hell she is. But anyway, all the little journals and stuff, they don't really piece together for me yet, but I do love the doling out that they have, that they're doing with them. There's just enough and not enough.
There's some terrific ones. There's one, my favorite one so far has been there were a couple really good ones, but my favorite one so far is when you go into the music room and you put together the Moonlight Sonata and play it.
Yeah.
Which bizarrely doesn't start properly. It starts with chords and then does the notes.
I thought so. I thought
it's actually wrong.
Okay.
So I'm thinking she pasted in a page wrong or something like that. That's my fiction.
you made up your own little.
She turned it upside down and stuck it in, and is like, this looks weird. Oh yeah, I remember how it goes. And that door opens. Well, that guy, he has some notes that he's written in a journal or something like that, and he refers to the lighter that you're using.
Yeah.
And I love that moment of this is his, I'm using his thing. I love that, tied in, and it's been in the house for 20 years or whatever.
So did you actually examine the lighter? You can look at.
Yeah, you can. So examine.
So there's that. We should talk about that maybe on the next episode or something. Just examining objects, which is a cool system and mechanic. And
cool. If you forget, you can do it, and it's a key aspect of one puzzle.
Oh yeah. We need to talk about that in so many ways. But my point is that if you look at the lighter, I think on the bottom of it, it actually mentions his name or
awesome.
Her name. It's like whatever it's it says to my love.
It's Jesse and Lisa, I think. Yeah.
And I examined it beforehand and found that, and then you find the journal after. And you're like, oh, that's cool. That's a nice little touch. There's the other one that I think maybe you find in the cabin. There's the one where as you read it, you see the descent of the sun.
Yeah, that is the. I like that one too. That's in a room. It's the guy who takes care of the dogs. It's the guy who takes care of the dogs.
Yeah, and he's like the font is.
And he doesn't like one of his coworkers, and then he starts devolving to the point where he actually is going to eat his coworker.
Yeah. There's a couple of those. Yeah, it's just it's nice.
Good things like that.
It's nice, passive, spooky content that just adds to the insanity of it all.
And then they're both there. Both of them are there as zombies, so that works out kind of nicely too. One's in the closet, and that's another little cutscene.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's another sort of interesting, camera choice. Now I'm first person as Jill. So it's always playing with who the vantage point is, or how it's presenting it. It's like, oh, it's kind of cockamamie, and it's an interesting little scene.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap up the first segment there, and then come back. I'll have a little bit of feedback, and then I'm gonna push just a couple things that I've done recently. Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
Hey, we're back from the break. I wanted to throw out a couple mentions of things that kind of tie into stuff that's been going on lately, or in one case, an older thing on my blog. The first of these is that the last AAA game I worked on, Skyrim, just had a re-release, a sort of high-def, current-gen, remaster edition of its own. Came out just about 5 years. Just about 2 weeks shy of the five-year anniversary, so that's kind of cool. As a result, I was invited to talk with a few of Gamasutra's editors and sort of play along and have them interview me while one of them was playing the game in the background, and that's available on gamasutra.com. They separately called out and wrote another little article about one specific topic I mentioned, which was that when I play games that are made by people who I know well or have worked with, I can often identify the things that they do. And I specifically called out Reed Knight and Troy Mashburn as examples. We've already mentioned Reed once in connection with Infernal Machine, in this episode. And both worked with us at LucasArts as level designers. Troy and I shipped the same three games I shipped with Tim at LucasArts. So I have not seen Troy in a dog's age, and I hope, if he's hearing this, I hope you're doing well, Troy.
He is. He's working on Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh, no kidding! That's great.
Yeah, he's the lead combat designer.
That's terrific. Oh yeah, I bet he'd be great at that. Good. I will move that up on my list because I was looking forward to that already. That is a good fit for him. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other thing was that while we were talking a little bit about Infernal Machine and Tim was talking about the Aetherium, I recalled writing a little bit about it on my blog, and I'll put a link to that in my show notes. I actually discussed what I really loved about the Aetherium back when I played that game in about 2006 or so. It was around the time the Tomb Raider Legend came out, and I was like, I'll go back and play this other thing I have. It was not a terribly stable game by that point.
No,
because there were bugs that had to do with the game running too fast, so it was not great. But once I figured out how to work around those, I was able to get through to the end. So I have some thoughts on Tim's level design in that. Okay, now it's time for feedback time. We got an email this week. You can send those emails with questions or thoughts to devgameclub@gmail.com. It's from Barrick Holt, who says, "Hi guys, loving the podcast. I just wished that my 12-minute commute to work was longer so I could keep up." I don't want to trade that off for you. I say stick with the 12-minute commute. Anyway, that's an aside. He says, "I've just finished listening to your Fallout series, and I was surprised that you didn't talk at all about the VATS system, though it wasn't named that until Fallout 3, I believe. It is a system that is very unique to the Fallout games. What are your opinions of it, and how do you think it has shaped other games? Keep up the great work, Barrick." So, I'll throw that over to you, designer man. VATS, Vault Assisted Tactical System, targeting system. I can't remember, tactical or targeting.
I had thought about it during the series whether I should bring it up, and I think in my head I had kind of merged VATS with kind of the whole franchise for some reason. And I mean, the truth of the matter is, in one, and I guess too as well, there really isn't VATS, right? I mean, it's a turn-based combat game.
But there is
because you're not pinpointing.
Yes, you are. Oh, maybe you may not be able to do it with fists.
Oh yeah, that's why. Right, of course.
Right.
So that's why I did. That's why I didn't bring it up this time, because I wasn't using that stuff. Yeah.
But with a ranged weapon, you can actually choose to spend an extra action point.
Yeah.
You might even be able to do that with fists. You can choose to spend an extra action point to be able to call your shot. Basically, I'm going to put it in the head, and it'll lay out a bunch of percentages. Like it'll be 44% to hit the eyes. It'll be 67% to hit the head. And in this game, you can also, you can target arms and legs and things like that. And I guess you can also, there's joke ones on many of the animals. If you target a Brahmin, you can actually target the udder. So there's lots of kind of gags in there as well, sight gags. And it's kind of this outline and all that stuff. And it's definitely something that we had in Fallout 3, where it's really kind of a core part of the experience in Fallout 3.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And that's my bad for forgetting that, because I didn't use it. I don't remember even. I don't think that that melee weapons actually, or fist weapons, give you the option, because I don't remember seeing it come up at all.
You have to, and you might not have noticed this, but you can right click on your weapon in the wide bar at the bottom where it's like what your action's going to be. If you right click on that, it cycles through, and you need to do that if you want to reload.
Yeah, I feel like I did reload well, maybe I just missed it. It's been many years since I played it.
It puts like a little bullseye symbol on it. It basically means you can call. So, it's something that was kind of in vogue not too long after Fallout. Like, I remember Soldier of Fortune, maybe, and
Soldier of Fortune was you mean as far as like location based? Location based targeting. Yeah, I think it had. I think VATS had a big influence on things for a little while after that. I think that extra layer of depth in combat was something that people were hungry for at that time. Because it was kind of all or nothing, and you either had, like we talked about in the series, you either had the super high action games, or any of the turn-based combat games didn't typically go too many layers beyond the tactical element of the position of the enemies themselves, versus even targeting individual pieces of the enemy. So I remember at the time, at least, being pretty excited as a gamer and blown away by that extra level, because you just felt like you had so much more control over a turn-based game, which was rare. Right,
and it added another level of that risk reward of I can aim for the eyes, and in fact there's a character you can talk to. I think Harold tells you he's a zombie in Hub, I think, that if you aim for the eyes, they're weaker there. So he basically gives you a hint that if you can shoot him in the eyes, you're more likely to land a critical hit. And that turned out to be true, and I often did VATS-based targeting against the Death Claws.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it from too long a range, because the numbers fall off pretty fast beyond a certain distance. But yeah, you could totally aim that assault rifle into the creature's head and hope to do like 100 points of damage all in one go. So
yeah. I think it's a good call out, and it's a good catch that we didn't talk about it. I would also say that the migration to Bethesda for the first person, full 3D version of the Fallout franchise, I think VATS ended up being pretty critical for that as well. Because Fallout 3's shooting was okay, but it leaned into VATS enough to where you were able to forgive some of those inaccuracies, because you had this extra system layered on top of it. So,
right, and of course it was just Oblivion with guns, and then Skyrim was Oblivion with guns without guns. So, and then they've come around again to be Oblivion with guns without guns with guns. So,
yeah, I think I followed that
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, it's a great system, and it's the sort of thing you would see in a tabletop game for sure. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do a called shot or something like that, and you say where you're gonna hit, and the DM makes some determination based on a table, like, okay, that's gonna be a -1 to hit or whatever, but you'll do more damage. They'll make these sort of decisions. So it's just one of those things. It's I would say the other thing though, it's the sort of thing that leads to save scumming because you're going to want to take on that Deathclaw when you're far too low level, and you figure, well, if I just get the numbers right 6 times in a row, and you can reload and reload and reload until you get a favorable random number, that can be a bad thing to play into, but that's on the player.
That's why I kind of like, so be it. If you're up for that,
there are players going to be out there who don't want to have fun and want to just sit there and play the same 5 minutes, forever. By all means.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hear all the laughter there, so that means it's time to wrap up.
I wasn't sure if you could.
It's that time again.
We were winding down, I guess.
We are devgameclub@gmail.com, thanks to Barrick. And we had no new reviews this week, so I'm not reading any. But you could leave us one on iTunes. Love to read those. I have RSS feeds set up now, so I see them all. I never forget about them. And we like to read those on the cast as well. Thanks to you who've been keeping that 5-star average rolling. Appreciate it. Love to have a few more, so please, if you have a minute. In the meantime, you can find us at DevGameClub on Twitter. I am at Brett_Duville, and he's
at Tim Lunga Jr. with the JR.
For next time, we should, since we didn't get to the tunnels this time, play up until the tunnels and maybe a little bit into them. We were going to try to do this game in 3 shows, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's taking Tim far too long. It's taking me far too long, to be honest. So I'm not going to grumble too much. But I'm almost to the tunnels now, so I'll have a light week. But you'll have to catch up a little bit. And there's some good stuff that happens in the tunnels, as I recall. I think that's when we're going to get our real encounter with Lisa. You're about to run into her now. So, but the next section that you're about to play in the Residence is pretty involved and has another sort of space that we might talk about next time where you're just like, what? Mm-hmm. Why is this here? Mm-hmm. As well as some enemies. So next time maybe we can talk the other enemies, some puzzles, and a few other topics that have come up. All right?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, we will see you all next week. And then we will actually be past our national nightmare.
Yeah, all right. There you go.
All right. Good night. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's still hoping the Batman will drop in response. Fuck, I screwed it up. Fuck!